Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. I am very, very excited about having this conversation. Um, if you've been keeping up with what's been happening lately, the BAFTAs happened not too long ago. And though this is award season and things happen, this one was a very unusual situation and case. And so, what it led me to do is really think about how do we have conversations that deal with people that have Tourette syndrome or any disability at the intersection of identity. And so I wanted to have this conversation, but I wanted to be very thoughtful about having this conversation. And so I brought in two people this week to have this discussion and really start to unpack some of the things that we are seeing and hearing in social media, try to better understand some of the perspectives that we're seeing and better understand how we can show up in different ways. And so today I have two guests, as I said, Dr. Latoya Edwards, who is a licensed clinical social worker, who will be joining us, as well as Dr. Annette Clark, who is a licensed clinical psychologist. And so, ladies, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So again, we're very laid back, so relax. We're just gonna have some conversation. But so, Dr. Latoya, can you give us a little bit of your background? Tell us who you are, so that our audience is aware.
Yes, so my name is Dr. Latoya Nicole Edwards. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I also am the proud owner of a group practice called Thriving Well Holistic Wellness Solutions, which is located in the state of Virginia. And we actually work with high achievers, individuals who are kind of at the intersection of being the strong friends. And a lot of my work actually centers around nervous system regulation. So specifically around a lot of high achievers and people who are working in corporate America and how they're navigating that. And a lot of my work actually, my research was on Black women in leadership and how to work with those marginalized spaces. Happy to be here.
So excited. There's so much we could talk about. And Dr. Annette, welcome, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Hi, I am Dr. Annette V. Clark, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. My background is I have expertise in diversity and community mental health, serious mental illness, and I work across the developmental lifespan in a number of different capacities. So I've been a psychotherapist, as well as teaching, educating. Specifically, my scholarly work is in the areas of immigration and acculturation, and specifically identity, Black identity, and in the interrelations with microaggressions and racism. And so I'm happy to be here to discuss that and be here with you all. Thank you.
And I am so excited that you all both were here. It's so funny. I kind of put this call out to my friends. I'm like, who do you know that I can talk to? And so your names came up, and just in conversation, I was like, yes. Okay, we need to have this conversation. So Dr. Latoya, can you give us kind of from a academic perspective or standpoint, this whole conversation started around what happened at BAFTA. And for those that, aren't aware of what happened, one of the attendees was there and actually was invited because one of the movies that was nominated was about his life with, and he has Tourette's. And so he had some outbursts during the show. And unfortunately, the one that was aired was the N-word. And while two Black actors were on stage. And so one of the questions that kind of came up, or what I started to see happen, was like, well, what is Tourette syndrome, right? We hear about it, but I don't necessarily think people understand what it is. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'll try to like break it down a little bit further. So I always talk about when people talk about Tourette's in public spaces, we're not necessarily talking about like a neurological condition. We're more so talking about like safety, dignity, and I guess the psychological impact of being misunderstood in real time. So
Mm.
oftentimes people who have Tourette's syndrome, they already live with like that hypervigilance, right? There's also that anticipatory shame that's going to happen as well too, some social anxiety, fear of misinterpretation, and it can also, because they're having these outbursts that are occurring, right, it's also going to cause a lot of acute stress within them, trauma triggers within them and other people, as well as that social threat of response, because they're thinking and their body is like, I'm not safe as well too, because they
Mhm.
don't have any control over what might come out, who they might offend after what has happened and occurred.
Yeah. Dr. Annette, one of the things that I realized, and I've been following this young lady on social media for a while, and she has been phenomenal. This was prior to this, right?
Mm.
Very open about having Tourette syndrome. And there's this specific, and I can never pronounce it correctly, specific aspect of Tourette's where they are the verbal outburst. But a lot of people, it manifests in different ways, right? So when they talk about tics, like what is a tic?
So it's an involuntary action, and it can be phonic or motor, right? So tics, you might see someone make a strange movement. It can be coughing, clearing the throat, or it could be saying certain words out loud. And I believe the word that you might be looking for is coprolalia or
Yes.
echolalia. So echolalia is something where they are repeating things, but coprolalia is really the utterance of profanities or swearing, that can include all manner of things that is involuntary. So in that way, it can be, a physical action or something verbal, a verbal utterance.
And it wasn't too long ago. I remember seeing, gosh, what is her name? Billie Eilish,
Mhm.
the singer,
Hmm.
um, did an interview some years ago with David Letterman,
Mhm.
and she had a tic. And she said, it's interesting because some people will see it and think that she's just being funny, or, she's just making this moment. And she said, it's the lights. The lights have which triggered her.
Hmm.
And so my understanding, and again, Dr. Latoya, we could talk about this, is sometimes people have good days and sometimes it could be something that triggers them to have a tic. Is that correct?
Similar to what my colleague was saying, I always say that the tics are involuntarily, right? And so they're not attention seeking. And it's not a disruption by choice or even controlled in the moment. So, like she was saying, lights and that particular thing can kind of cause that disruptance too. Even when I'm working with clients or I go and speak somewhere too, I'm very cognizant of like lighting, fonts, colors, because those could actually disrupt someone too. But I also would not expect an everyday person to think about some of these nuances when we're
Hmm.
looking about, we talk about inclusivity, right? We just think
Mhm.
about some of the black and white things, but not thinking about things such as lighting could be a trigger for somebody, or flashes too, or even colors.
Right. Yeah. The inclusive person in me, right? So I did marketing, I did events for years, and we really focused on creating inclusive spaces. And it was during that time that I realized, lighting and certain smells even
Mhm.
could trigger people. And so we were very cognizant of how we created spaces or what we put in spaces so that even if somebody was triggered, they didn't feel as if they had to be ostracized. And
Mhm.
so, the more and more I think about this and just unpacking what I've seen, and we could just have conversation, at this point, the more and more I've started seeing people writing about, well, if he knew that he had, this situation or this issue, then he shouldn't have come,
Right.
or they should have put him in a different room. And to me, that's counterproductive. especially if you're there because of a movie about Tourette's, right? And you're trying to see and understand more about what is happening. And so what is it about this particular syndrome, right? Tourette syndrome, that makes us think that we need to ostracize people? And either one of you can answer.
Well, I'll say this: it's ableist. I'm going to put the word out there. It's ableist to say that, just because someone has a disability, that they shouldn't be involved. That he shouldn't have come to an event where a movie that was focused on him and his life was nominated and actually won the award, I believe. The main actor, right? So to say that, oh, he shouldn't be here because he's disabled, that's incredibly ableist. And kind of going back to what you were talking about trying to manage certain spaces or decrease triggers in spaces. I'm pretty sure they did not have that level of thought when it came to this gentleman. And it's interesting, we can get into that he had different agreements with the BAFTAs in order to protect people that were that where there were lapses on BAFTA's part. But it's incredibly ableist to try to shun people or tell them they don't belong, and it perpetuates stigma. So that response is an easy fix, but it's not a fix, because then someone is marginalized, someone is removed when they need to be included.
Can I add to that as well, if you don't mind?
Absolutely.
Because it made me think too. So I practice through an Afrocentric, African-centered practice, right? And so dignity, which is also part of the principle of Mayat, right? Mm-hmm. What was disrupted, if we're thinking about just hearing what she was saying, it made me think what was disrupted during this whole thing was there's truth, balance, order, justice, and harmony, right? And when disruptions occurred, right? And there's more than that. Those are the ways I'm going to hit on right now. But balance, harmony, and respect were disrupted, right? And when you would hit on not because the individual had Tourette's, right? But because there was a lack of communal repair, right? Correct. And I think similar to what she was saying, yes, educating the audience about this is what's going to happen too. But then also when disruption has happened, repairing so that people know that, hey, there's a safe space for you and a safe space for you as well too. And so I think when harmony is broken, restoration must follow.
Oh,
right.
And I love that.
And that was a piece that was completely lacking, right? There was no repair. That I always say, the intent doesn't matter, right? The impact is always greater than intent. And so the impact of the words on the two presenters specifically, but also on us as a people, as a community. The word went out, on the airwaves and reached millions of people. So we were all affected, Black, white, other people, we were all affected by it. And obviously people who that word has been used against and for years and years and years, impacted more so than others.
Yeah. And I was just going to add that piece to it, right? So now we're dealing with the disability community and the ableism aspect of it, but because of the word that was yelled, now there's racism, right? Now there's this other ism that has come into play. And what was challenging for me, again, this is just how I operate, is who was harmed and how do we protect them, right? So going back to what you're saying, Latoya, how do we start that repair process? And fortunately and unfortunately, and I say fortunately because when situations like this happen, you start to really see kind of how people think and operate, how systems are set up. And unfortunately, the harm is also never really addressed, right? Until it's a forced thing. And at that point, it doesn't matter because now the damage has truly been done. And so what I started to see kind of play out was this balance between, or this imbalance between, this person has Tourette syndrome. This is, involuntary, yada, yada, yada. But then there's like, but that word holds a whole lot of weight, and there's a whole lot of damage that word has had with it historically.
Right.
And so to come from a white man, regardless of the disability, there's a level of power and perceived racism that's there, right? So now you have this battle of the isms that I call, and it's like this, which ism is worse? And I'm like, okay, we're not having like Olympic Games here where we're trying to battle this out. It's both are bad. And how do you heal when you have two different communities that don't often that do intersect, but not often, right? And so I'll leave it to either one of you. How do you start to unpack that?
So, you want to go?
Well, what I'm thinking is, I think people really need to understand multiple identities and intersectionality, right? We all have them. We all have, various identities across the board where, in categories of, race, education, social and economic status, gender, sexual orientation. We all have our various identities. And when they intersect and interact, right, that can compound our experiences. That affects our experiences, right? The combination of those. So, you can't separate, like, for example, I can't separate out being a Black woman immigrant. I can't separate those things because they all come together to say, okay, this is who I am. So I think people really needing to understand it. Now, at certain times, depending on the situation, certain identities become more salient and come to the forefront. So, obviously hearing that word, our Black identity comes to the forefront. And because that word has been used to assault that Black identity. So that comes to the forefront. But what about those people who have those identity, who has the Black identity, as well as an identity of being disabled or having mental health, and specifically having Tourette's? And so as we've seen it play out on social media, we see, influencers who are Black and happen to have Tourette's speaking out on this. And, their experience is not being recognized or understood, and they're being accused of, choosing one side versus the other, when in reality, they can't separate out, oh, I'm Black today and I have Tourette's tomorrow. No, they are a Black person with Tourette's every day. And so this is impacting them on those multiple identities where most of us are only impacted on one level. And I would say, I guess having empathy for other people, I would, even though I'm not necessarily in that group, I'm impacted by the ableism as well. And I think people need to understand that although you may not share those identities, you may still be impacted by those offenses that are happen against someone with a particular identity, even if you don't share that identity.
Yeah.
There's a lack of understanding about that and about that interaction and what happens.
And I agree with what you're saying too, because I think also probably why there was also an outcry to the degree that it was, because similar to like you were saying, people may not identify with Tourette's, so they may be both Tourette's and identify in a Black body. But I always tell people, even as a somatic psychotherapist, I always go back into that nervous system, right? Words carry ancestral meanings, right? And memory.
Absolutely.
And so if we're thinking about that, it's like when those individual Black actors heard those words, that even we as Black people heard those words, they were part of us that felt dehumanized. There were parts of us, there was that cultural consciousness, part of us of like that embodied lineage that we were hearing that carries with us too. So like Black individuals, we were hearing this word not just as a present moment experience, but it activated those ancestral and collective memories. And so I always say the body remembers even when the speaker did not intend to cause harm. And so I think as a way for us to repair it is having conversations like this that we're having right now, right? There was a little bit of I guess shakeup when the host had then said if it caused harm, which I think those words have meaning. And so I think if we're looking at this through a way to repair, I think we recognize that, hey, we can realize that two things can happen. We have an individual who has an invisible disability, and then also Black actors too who were also harmed at the same time, to say, hey, this happened. We're apologizing for the harm that it caused everyone involved, not if, right? Again, because we said words have that too, but it's also now causing a conversation about what is Tourette's, right? People are starting to name about racial impacts and how that's, and also affirming what belonging looks like. And have I even been inclusive to somebody who may have an invisible disability or disorder? You know what I mean? So just belonging without humiliation.
Yeah. That's the thing. A lot of people that are like, saying, oh, he should have been put away, whatever. I think that they think that they are inclusive, that they're inclusive and welcoming, and they create community. I think that they think that on certain levels until they reach someone that they don't understand, that they don't share an identity with.
Right. And I think what's interesting about this, and I shared at the top, there's two people that I've been following for a while on social media. One's a young lady, African-American Black lady with Tourette's, that has been using her platform long before this to talk about, her experience and what it's like, and some of the things that have triggered her, or just even questions people have about her day-to-day, just interactions, because people are curious. And I think that was a bit what I loved about it, is she's just very open and honest, and she has her tics as she's recording. So you get to see, like, okay, this is absolutely involuntary. And some of her tics, and she'll even say, people say some of her tics are cute because she'll repeat things from cartoons or repeat things from TV shows, right? But at the same time, I went to these two Instagram posts, these two people on Instagram after this situation happened, because I was like, are they going to respond? And both of them had responses. I'll separate the two. The young lady ended up doing a response, and that I ended up reposting, several times, because I think she did a phenomenal job of explaining her experience. And she said the N-word is one of her tics. Right. And so she explained what that means and what that looks like and how that feels. The next day, she ended up posting just words, because she said everything has been so overwhelming for her. Just the nasty comments, the good comments, but also the nasty comments that were coming to her. And again, in my mind, as I'm thinking about care, and I'm thinking about how do you protect peace? Like, that is somebody, how do you protect peace? I was just like, you know what? She needs space. She needs, because this can absolutely be overwhelming. The gentleman that I follow, and I think Annette, you were saying you've been following this guy for the same, for a while too. Didn't even know he had Tourette's until he came out with a statement saying that he had it. But he also talked about the involuntary nature of it. And he talked about how, he said, in cartoons, when you see the devil and the angel, he was like, the devil always wins, because that devil is what you're not supposed to say. And that's what your body says. And so he said, he talked about, some of the things that he said to his mother. He called his mother as a kid. And he was like, I didn't mean, she knew I didn't mean that. And I didn't mean that. And I felt horrified. But that's just how it works, right? And so for many people, they hyper focus on what's the worst thing that I could say in this moment, and that's what comes out. And so, and apparently with the BAFTAs, this particular individual, Jonathan, said other things throughout the show too to other people, right? And we won't go down the rabbit hole of BBC and why they edited some stuff out and they didn't edit that out. That's a whole other show and a conspiracy theory that I have. But I think that it showcases that this is not a choice, right? Somebody does not choose to, oh, I want to be in the spotlight today, so I'm going to say this crazy thing that's going to get all of this attention because I want all of this attention. This is probably the worst thing that could happen to an individual that has Tourette's, right? Like to be highlighted and showcased in this way, attacked in so many different ways as well. The gentleman that I follow, excuse me, on Instagram even shared that he's gotten death threats, that he's, received all kinds of nasty messages because people feel like he has chosen Tourette's over being a Black man. And so, Dr. Annette, I appreciate what you said and like the intersectionality of it all. You can't pick and choose who you want to be today or tomorrow. Like this is just the embodiment of everything of who I am. So I know I've just been rambling, but these are the things that are just kind of in my head. So, the next question that I have to both of you is now that and my listeners will know I say this all the time, now that we know what we know, right? How do we move forward, especially as more information is now being shared about Tourette's, which I think is a good thing in at least educating people. But more specifically, and actually I'll Dr. Annette, I'll have you answer that piece because Dr. Latoya, I have another question for you. So how do we start to move forward?
Right. Well, you mentioned the first step, educating yourself on, this particular disorder, syndrome, Tourette syndrome, specifically because of the situation, but also educating oneself about ableism, right? Now, a lot of us understand and know the history behind the word, but some people don't. Some people don't understand it. But I think, one thing I saw was that why is it in his vocabulary? How does he know that word? He knows that word, simply put, because we are steeped in a racist society and everyone knows the word, right? So I think educating oneself about that, about the history of it, about the impact on the people that has been used against is really important. But also understanding the dynamics of, just because you didn't intend to cause harm was caused, right? So understanding that dynamic of intent versus impact and understanding that the impact is what is really important on people, right? It doesn't matter how good a person you are, it doesn't matter, where you come from, or it's not your values, you impacted someone. And, no matter the situation, whether you have a mental illness or not, that piece is important in how you get along in the world, come back into community. You need to recognize the impact in order to be able to come back together, in order to be able to heal and to restore, right? That's a big part of it, is to recognize that impact and to recognize, to be able to restore and move on, because we just brushing it under the rug won't help, right? And a lot of us, I'll say this, some people have more vocabulary for explaining these things and more experience with it. And other people just don't. And so here's an opportunity for those people to become more educated about it and develop more facility in talking about it. And, whatever happened, at BAFTA, those people were better able to discuss ableism than they were racism. And, we can go into a whole thing about why that could be. But, developing the facility and the vocabulary to discuss these things are important. We saw Delroy Lindo make, a decision that many of us have had to make in, he immediately picked up the banner and went on, right? He heard the word and he chose to go on to continue what he was doing because he was at work, right? And so we've all had that situation where we've heard something, we've seen something, but we've had to pick up and move on. But not everyone has had to experience it on a racial level and have the facility and ease in speaking about it. So that piece is really important. And you can't have, we can't move forward because we can't ignore it. That's not going to work unless we acknowledge it, unless we accept it and say, no one's attacking anyone personally, but we need to understand where this all comes from, and it comes from, our history, our shared history, and our multiple identities, intersections, as they bump into each other. We're all like constellations of identities bumping into each other, right? And what happens when that, there could be a big explosion, the Big Bang, right? So I think that's a key piece in being able to move forward, listening to understand and learn rather than just to, respond or attack. And, trying to understand, coming at it with some humility to try to understand.
Yeah. Dr. Latoya, I keep saying Latoya. I want to look at this from the perspective of how I want to take this down another level to the African American Black community, right? In healing there, because I think unconsciously, what I started to see happening was this othering within the Black community of individuals with disabilities. And it's like that ableism piece, but with your own people, right? Like there's a different level of harm and trauma that happens when it could be your own folks, right? When it's your own people that's doing it, it's a different level of hurt. Right. And so how do we start to heal and build and repair when it's so close to home?
Yeah. And I think I feel like I'm at school again with my students. I always say, context plus care equals restoration. And the reason why I say that, too, is because, like I said, both of those realities still exist. Right. And there was that issue of there was an absent or a lack of communal holding, right? And if we're looking at things through an African-centered tradition, the response would not be to remove or minimize, right? Too. And then oftentimes, too, something that I've noticed that when we as Black people also hold multiple things, right? So these, like you said, they're Black, but they also identify with Tourette's too. They sometimes will take on this cape and armor of, I have to overperform and show you these are the things that, to let you know, I'm trying to kind of almost one up. So I also feel for those individuals too at that time, because their nervous system, they probably were exhausted because again, they're getting this secondary trauma that they've already been trying to kind of shed light from, by educating the public about it. But then now we're being judged by, trying to exist. And so I say, if we're truly opening up things to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that inclusion part also includes them as well, too. And it expands beyond race and gender, right? Like I said, individuals with visible and invisible disabilities, too. And so by telling them these things, too, I think we're also raising awareness for these individuals to have more, I would say, dignity. Their dignity is protected. I would also say even their justice is being repaired because it's consistency, like individuals such as I and us on the panel providing information so that they don't feel like they're in this fight alone, right? We're utilizing us being able-bodied Black people to say, hey, I'm going to look, also advocate for my other brothers and sisters who do identify with Tourette's too, to say, hey, no, this is something that is neurological. They're not doing this on purpose. They're not trying to cause harm. So again, they now feel like, you know what, I'm not carrying this alone too. And so having discussions like this with different people of different backgrounds really helps to make them feel like, you know what, I am human, because they've already been feeling dehumanized.
Yeah.
It helps to break down the stigma.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It helps to break down a stigma. And, within the Black community, there still continues to be a lot of stigma against mental health problems and mental
Mhm.
disorders. So this conversation is really great to kind of highlight that and highlight the fact that, just because we're Black doesn't mean we have all of the facility and all of the compassion and all of the we lack the isms, right?
Mhm.
So that piece is really important to kind of it highlights for ourselves the work that we still need to continue to do to really truly embody diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I always say, I'm like, sometimes we are the ones that need to be in that class more so than other people. Because for so many Black people, they're hyper focused on the race piece, which is absolutely important and absolutely something that needs to be highlighted within, especially in this country. But there's so many other identities that we fall short on. And I think this is one of those areas that we absolutely fall short. And I do want to call out and let the audience know that I made the decision to have two professionals have this conversation because I was going to bring someone on that was, that has Tourette's and realize, I need to protect. So I'm glad that you said we need to show up as allies in this space when we can to hold the conversation and to push ourselves forward so they don't always have to be the ones on the front line, because that was also something that I was seeing a lot of on social media was this sense of I'm tired of having to justify who I am. I'm tired of having to explain this thing that has happened to me that I didn't ask for this to happen, right? And so for me, it was a matter of how can I listen and hold space without putting you in the forefront and to protect that piece as much as I can. So this really is a conversation of understanding, and educating, but then also, as I say, allyship is a verb, right? This is putting yourself out there to protect those in community that are often fighting. And so I want to thank you both for joining me in this conversation. I hope that it opens up other doors for people to have conversations in this space. And hopefully at some point, once this all goes away and people can relax a little bit, have someone that has Tourette's syndrome to come on the show to talk about it in a meaningful way. So Dr. Annette, Dr. Latoya, thank you so much for being here, for holding space, for helping to educate us and continuing to do the work that you do. Because, we need more of you all in this work. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so for everyone else, I'm glad that you were able to tune into this week's episode. As always, I hope you were able to walk away with a nugget or two, or something that you did not know, or just curiosity about something you want to dive deeper into. And as always, until next time, have a good one.
I am back from my short break. I needed some time to be able to mentally get myself together, time to also learn how to properly speak about this situation. First and foremost, I am a proud Black woman that also suffers from Tourette syndrome and coprolalia. As stated in my previous video, coprolalia causes involuntary swearing, offensive terms, slurs, etc. Unfortunately, in my initial post, a lot of people took it as I was putting my disability above my race. I can't put one of those above the other. I am both at the same time, affected in both ways by this. However, being a part of both communities does not mean that I excuse the social responsibilities or respect that we mutually owe each other. While Tourette syndrome and coprolalia are both real, not take away the harm or trauma that it can cause people depending on what the tic is. That being said, it should have been obvious to BAFTA that they not only had a moral responsibility, but a essential regard to the Black community, the audience, and frankly society at large, to immediately remove the slur that was used. This was pre-recorded, and I also heard that there was a 2-hour delay and most definitely could have been edited out. Their decision to not do so is disgusting, as they deliberately and purposely edited out other things things that were deemed as inappropriate. This displays a very blatant disregard for the pain, trauma, and racial discourse that this could have and did cause. Now, BAFTA did release a statement, but their response did not say why they didn't edit out the racial slur that was used. A full and complete apology is needed. John Davidson, I do sympathize and empathize with you as a person with Tourette syndrome, also has coprolalia, but I believe that it is still your responsibility to apologize.
DEI After 5 is produced by the Leon Thomas Group. For more information, go to the Leon Thomas